What's up everybody, this is Master Ian Gamer. Papa Jeff may have left, but that doesn't mean we don't have anything positive to look forward to when it comes to the future of Overwatch. In fact, according to Overwatch's new game director, Aaron Keller, it sounds like there's going to be some pretty big, significant features coming to the game in the not-so-distant future. So in today's video, I want to take an in-depth look at two of the most likely candidates for what these new features are going to be, which are crossplay and free-to-play. Both of these features have been heavily requested by Overwatch's community and are also features present in many of the game's competitors. So with new leadership at the helm of Overwatch, does that mean we're finally going to be seeing crossplay and free-to-play coming to the game? Well, let's talk about it. Real quick though, before I jump into the details, I just want to remind you to subscribe and hit up that bell icon if you end up enjoying this video, as that does a ton to help out my channel and keeps you up to date on all future Overwatch and Overwatch 2 news and content. But now, let's take a look at crossplay and free-to-play as being potential features coming soon to Overwatch. So given that I'm going to be talking about two distinct features in one video, I'm going to split it up and first focus on crossplay. Now, crossplay, for those of you who aren't familiar with the term, simply means allowing players on separate platforms to be able to play together in the same matches. So for example, let's say one player is on PC, another one is playing on Xbox, and another on PlayStation. All three of those players would be able to play together either in a group as friends, or just happening to be on the same team, or on separate teams against each other. Basically, it just merges the player bases, and there are quite a few benefits when it comes to that. Focusing first on the pros of crossplay, perhaps the most appealing aspect of adding this as a feature is that it will tremendously improve queue times and matchmaking. When you merge the player bases together in this way, you vastly increase the size of the player pool, as instead of having a separate pool of players for each system, everyone is playing together in one big universal pool. More players means it's easier for the matchmaking system to find players around your same skill level, thus improving the skill balance of every individual match you play in, which also improves queue times because it takes less time for the matchmaking system to find people who are compatible for a match with you. But beyond just matchmaking improvements, this also introduces a number of benefits when it comes to the social aspect of Overwatch, specifically when it comes to allowing friends and acquaintances who are on separate platforms to finally be able to play with each other. I personally know a number of people who play only on Xbox or PlayStation, and as a PC player myself, I've never been able to play Overwatch with them. But if crossplay was introduced, I'd finally be able to queue up with them and have a good time. Beyond just the individual level of specific people being able to enjoy playing with friends they've never been able to play with before, overall we could expect this to have some pretty positive impacts on the community of the game at large. Typically, when people are capable of playing with people they enjoy playing with, they're going to have a more positive view of the game. Also, it could very easily bring back players who used to play the game but maybe stopped playing because they didn't have any friends who were still playing on their same system, but maybe they know somebody else who still plays the game but just happens to be on a different console than them, and thus the introduction of crossplay would incentivize them to come back to the game. However, despite all these clear benefits when it comes to crossplay being a feature in Overwatch, you also have to acknowledge that there are going to be some drawbacks if this feature is introduced. And mainly, this is going to boil down to the difference in capabilities when it comes to someone playing with a mouse and keyboard versus somebody playing with a controller. Now, without devolving into an elitist ramble about how PC is better than consoles, it's undeniable that you have more control over aiming and typically movement of your character when using a mouse and keyboard versus a controller, and thus that will inherently introduce some inconsistencies when it comes to playing with people who are using both PC and console controls. While when it comes to a hero like Winston or Reinhardt, it might not be much of an issue, imagine if you're playing in a match where both teams have a Widowmaker and your team's Widowmaker is playing on console and using a controller, and the other team's Widowmaker is on PC with a mouse and keyboard.
Defeat.
No matter how much you might prefer one system over another, you have to admit that that would not be a fair matchup. Now, it's also worth noting that if a feature like crossplay ends up being added to Overwatch, there will almost certainly be an option to turn it on or off, thus preventing console players from being forced to match up against PC Widowmakers. And I pretty much guarantee you that competitive mode would not be crossplay, as that would just be completely unfair. But when it comes to quick play and arcade game modes, there's absolutely an argument to be made about how it would improve the game's quality. So, considering both the pros and cons of crossplay, is it something worth adding as a feature to Overwatch? Well, I'm not going to answer that just yet. First, I want to also talk about free-to-play, and then cover my final thoughts about what should and shouldn't be added at the end of the video. So, moving on to free-to-play, how would this impact the state of Overwatch? Well, just like crossplay, it would vastly improve queue times and matchmaking. By removing the monetary barrier to entry, many more people would have access to Overwatch, and thus more people would be playing the game. Having more people playing the game, similar to having multiple different system pools pooled together, makes it easier for the matchmaking system to find players in your same skill tier, and thus will also improve queue times. On top of this, making Overwatch free-to-play could vastly boost interest in the game overall by allowing people to just more easily try it out and potentially get hooked. Just think about all the people out there who are potentially interested in Overwatch but don't necessarily want to pay that price just to try it out. Now it's going to be free for them to try, and if they're interested, they'll stick around, and if not, well, they haven't lost anything. Looking at the overwhelming success of other free-to-play games, such as Fortnite and Apex Legends, it's pretty clear to see that making this change to Overwatch's monetization system could vastly boost the game's player numbers. However, just like crossplay, there are also some downsides to making Overwatch free-to-play. First and foremost, Smurfs and Smurfs and more Smurfs and Smurfs and Smurfs and Smurfs and Smurfs and cheaters. Now, this might not be much of a change if you're playing on console already, since apparently their system is set up where you can just make infinite accounts with just one copy of the game and just smurf all you want. But for us elitist PC players, we've had the luxury of new players having to purchase an account in order to make a Smurf account. That same monetary barrier to entry, which is preventing people from trying out the game for the first time, was also reducing the chances of any given toxic player from just making a ton of alternate accounts to smurf and ruin other people's games. On top of that, cheating is going to become much more rampant with free-to-play accounts for the exact same reason. If someone's cheating for using a hack in Overwatch and they get banned for it, well, just make a new account, get right back in, and start using that hack again. Now, admittedly, I wouldn't be surprised if Blizzard implemented something like a phone verification system in order for people to play competitive, just to reduce the number of smurfs and cheaters who end up in the more competitive game modes. But when it comes to quick play and arcade, it's pretty much just open season. And as someone who predominantly plays quick play and arcade, I can't honestly say I'd be super duper excited for that. Plus, on top of that, making Overwatch free-to-play would cause Blizzard to miss out on a ton of revenue that they otherwise would have made through having people purchase the base game. Therefore, it's pretty safe to assume that if Overwatch did end up going free-to-play, there would be some pretty substantial monetization changes, likely when it comes to in-game microtransactions. As is, Overwatch is actually pretty good currently when it comes to the monetization in it, as it's not super predatory and you really only need to use it to unlock cosmetics. However, if Blizzard shifted to a free-to-play model, I could easily see the monetization getting much more aggressive. Prices for loot boxes and other cosmetics in-game could go up, or dare I even suggest the terrifying possibility of having to pay for new heroes. I don't think we're going to see something that terrible, at least not in Overwatch 1. But it is important to note that making big changes to Overwatch's monetization system can have some pretty drastic drawbacks when it comes to Blizzard finding other ways of making money off the game. It's also worth considering how Blizzard might or might not compensate people who already bought the game originally once it goes free to play. Would they be compensated at all? Maybe they just get a few loot boxes? Maybe some sort of in-game exclusive cosmetic to mark the fact that you paid for the game back in the good old days? Or maybe we'll just be hung out to dry. You paid for the game, just should've waited, then you could've played it for free, but at least you got to enjoy it before the reign of the Smurfs. Anyways, now that I've covered both crossplay and free-to-play, which of these features do I think is going to be coming in the near future for Overwatch? Well, in all honesty, when it comes to Overwatch 1, I think either is technically possible, but if we do end up seeing either of them, I think it's going to be crossplay. As I talked about earlier in this video, crossplay I think just has a much better trade-off in terms of the benefits of introducing it versus the negatives. And even when it comes to the negatives of crossplay, I think overall Overwatch, especially at this point in time, would vastly benefit from merging the different player bases. As is, queue times and matchmaking have been less than satisfactory, should I say, and adding crossplay would be an easy and straightforward way to fix many of those problems, on top of the fact that it'll let people on different systems play with their friends. In addition to this, I think the actual implementation of crossplay would be easier than trying to push Overwatch into being free to play. I realize that there's a lot of technical things they have to work out on the back end of the game in order to make crossplay work, but overall, I think that's going to be a lot simpler than the massive shock to the system free-to-play would introduce. As I mentioned, smurfs and cheaters are going to be rampant, but on top of that, it's likely it'll be accompanied by some significant overhaul to the monetization system, and if I'm being honest, that sort of thing just feels more fitting to come with Overwatch 2. Think about it, if Blizzard waits to implement free-to-play until Overwatch 2 releases, it'll be much easier for them to, well, get away with things. For one thing, they can justify not having to compensate players who already purchased the game, since Overwatch 2, for all intents and purposes, is just a new, separate game that people would otherwise have to purchase, unless it's free to play, of course. And while we do know that people who already own Overwatch 1 will have their cosmetics carry over into Overwatch 2, that could end up working just as simply as, oh, verify that you had an Overwatch 1 account once Overwatch 2 releases, and all your stuff will just transfer over. It would also be far simpler to implement the new monetization system, whatever that ends up being, with the release of Overwatch 2, as they can essentially build it from the ground up instead of having to just modify and tweak the already existing monetization system, which players are already used to. So unless Blizzard reaches the point where Overwatch is absolutely desperate to get any new players it can, it just makes far more sense for them to wait until Overwatch 2 before implementing a free-to-play system. So that being said, of the two features I talked about in this video, crossplay, in my opinion, is by far the more likely feature for us to end up seeing for Overwatch 1, although admittedly, both are realistically possible. So, if we do end up seeing one or both of these, when can we expect these new features to end up being added? Well, based on what Aaron Keller has been talking about with the mystery new features coming to Overwatch 1, it seems like they're gonna at least start talking about them in the near future. And what else happens to be happening in the near future? That's right, the 2021 Overwatch Anniversary event. As I've talked about in my previous videos discussing the upcoming event, the anniversary is an opportune time to make big announcements and introduce big new features. Lots of people get excited for the anniversary. It's one of the biggest cosmetic events of the year. So what better time to announce that Overwatch is going to be adding crossplay than during the anniversary event? If we do see a feature as big as crossplay being added, then I'm sure Blizzard will announce that it's coming before they implement it. So I wouldn't be surprised if, like, the first week of the anniversary event, Blizzard makes a forum post or uploads a new dev update talking about crossplay being a feature coming to the game, and then maybe like a month afterwards, we'll finally end up getting it. Just based on the timeline of what Aaron Keller has talked about, I could honestly see that being a very realistic possibility. That being said, however, there's no guarantee we'll be getting anything as soon as Anniversary, and there's no guarantee that we'll be getting crossplay, or free-to-play, ever. But given the state of Overwatch at this point, and the clear benefits to it that it would obtain by getting crossplay and or free-to-play, I think both are things which Blizzard should very seriously be considering at this point in time. But for the time being, we're just gonna have to wait and see what they end up doing. But are you a fan of crossplay or free-to-play? Which do you think would be a better feature for Blizzard to introduce? Definitely let me know your thoughts on these by dropping a comment down below. Thank you so much for watching, and be sure to subscribe, follow me on Twitter, hit up that bell icon, and come join my Discord server to hang out and never miss any of my future Overwatch content. Special thanks to my YouTube channel members who help make these videos possible, and if you'd like to join them to earn some cool rewards like getting your name at the end of my videos, then just hit that join button down below. Otherwise, this is Master Ian Gamer signing off, and until next time, have a great day.